In a moment that will reverberate across the Middle East and the world, multiple Israeli sources are reporting that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has been killed in a series of coordinated military strikes carried out earlier today. This breaking news, confirmed by two independent Israeli sources, signals a seismic shift in regional dynamics and the potential for dramatic changes in Iran's political landscape. The strikes, targeting Iran's senior leadership. According to initial reports, Israeli military forces launched precision strikes aimed explicitly at Iran's senior leadership. While previous operations have focused on military infrastructure, today's attacks were designed to decapitate the uppermost echelons of power in Tehran. Israeli intelligence reportedly possesses photographic evidence of Ayatollah Khamenei's death, including images of the leader's body following the strikes. These operations were the culmination of weeks, if not months, of careful planning between Israeli and U.S. intelligence agencies. Sources indicate that while the United States has primarily targeted military sites and infrastructure, Israel assumed responsibility for strikes against senior Iranian officials, including the supreme leader himself. One Israeli source noted that an official announcement regarding Khamenei's death may soon be coordinated with the United States, potentially allowing the President of the United States to publicly confirm the event. Regardless, the confirmation from Israeli officials alone constitutes a moment of historic significance. Context: the Ayatollah and Iran's power structure. To understand the gravity of this development, one must appreciate the structure of Iran's government. While Iran has an elected president and parliament, ultimate authority resides with the supreme leader. The supreme leader not only exercises overarching political power, but also holds substantial religious authority, guiding both policy and ideology throughout the country. Ayatollah Khamenei, who has held this position since 1989, was acutely aware of the risks inherent in his role. Intelligence sources suggest he had been preparing contingency plans for succession, anticipating the possibility of assassination or targeted strikes against him. While his death is monumental, experts caution that Iran's regime is not solely dependent on one individual. Its multi-layered political, military, and religious systems mean the government could persist, albeit in a state of potential upheaval. Confirmation and sources. CNN correspondent Jeremy Diamond reported that two Israeli sources independently confirmed Khamenei's death. One source indicated that Israel had visual confirmation, while the other mentioned an imminent official statement. Both sources emphasized that these strikes were part of a broader, carefully coordinated operation targeting multiple senior Iranian leaders, though the fate of others remains unclear. In addition to Israeli reports, CNN's Jim Sciutto and global affairs analyst Barak Ravid spoke to sources suggesting the body of the supreme leader had been retrieved from the rubble of his compound in Tehran. Discussions with President Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago revealed that U.S. officials were closely monitoring the operation, with contingency plans in place for various outcomes. Immediate implications. The immediate implications of Khamenei's death are profound. For Israel, it marks the culmination of long-held strategic objectives. For Iran, it represents a potentially destabilizing moment that could alter the balance of power within its government. Iranian dissidents and protesters, who have long called for reform and opposition to the ruling regime, may see this as a pivotal moment to intensify their efforts, though the risks remain high given the regime's capacity for forceful retaliation. Military analysts caution that the removal of the supreme leader does not equate to the collapse of the Iranian government. The nation possesses extensive military, political, and economic structures that can continue functioning even amidst leadership upheaval. However, the loss of the central figure of authority is likely to cause internal struggles for power and could open opportunities for shifts in policy and international relations. U.S.-Israel coordination reports indicate a high level of coordination between U.S. and Israeli forces in planning these strikes. While the United States focused on military targets and infrastructure, Israel undertook the mission to neutralize senior leadership. This distinction, while technically separate, underscores the depth of strategic cooperation between the two nations. President Trump reportedly communicated a clear set of objectives, emphasizing the importance of preventing Iran from continuing its nuclear program and missile development. Sources indicate that the current operation, dubbed Epic Fury, builds on previous operations such as Midnight Hammer, which targeted Iranian nuclear facilities last year. According to intelligence briefings, these prior strikes prevented Iran from advancing toward a nuclear weapon, laying the groundwork for today's decisive actions. Reactions: political and global. The global reaction to this development has been immediate and intense. Israeli officials have hailed the operation as a significant achievement, while U.S. officials have highlighted the precision and coordination required to carry out such an operation successfully. Meanwhile, Iranian state media has not yet confirmed Khamenei's death. Uncertainty remains over how the Iranian government will respond publicly and internally. Analysts suggest that Iran may seek to consolidate power quickly to maintain stability and control, while simultaneously preparing for possible retaliatory measures against perceived aggressors. Protest movements within Iran may find renewed momentum in the wake of Khamenei's death, but the regime's history of suppressing dissent suggests that public demonstrations could be met with significant force. Observers are closely watching cities such as Tehran, Mashhad, and Isfahan, where anti-government sentiment has been historically strong. Regional geopolitical implications. The death of Iran's supreme leader has far-reaching consequences for the Middle East. Neighboring countries, including Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Syria, are closely monitoring developments to assess potential shifts in Iranian policy and regional influence. Non-state actors, including Hezbollah and other Iranian-aligned militias, may also respond strategically to the leadership vacuum, potentially escalating conflicts in various theaters across the region. The international community is likely to engage in rapid diplomatic efforts to stabilize the situation. The United Nations, European Union, and major global powers will be assessing both humanitarian concerns and strategic risks. Analysts predict a period of heightened tension as nations recalibrate their approaches to Iran and the wider Middle East. The question of succession. Iran's succession process is inherently opaque, with decisions often made behind closed doors by senior clerics and political figures. Khamenei's death triggers an urgent need to determine his successor, with the possibility of factional disputes emerging within Iran's power structure. Various candidates, including senior clerics and military leaders, are reportedly under consideration, but the process remains uncertain. The potential for a new supreme leader to emerge carries both risks and opportunities. Some analysts speculate that a more hardline figure could seek vengeance against perceived enemies, while a pragmatic leader might prioritize internal stabilization and cautious engagement with the international community. Long-term strategic considerations. Long-term, the death of Iran's supreme leader is likely to reshape strategic calculations across multiple domains. Military. Iran may reevaluate its defense posture and retaliatory capabilities, including missile deployments and regional proxy operations. Political. Internal power struggles could redefine domestic policy and governance, influencing the balance between elected officials and religious authorities. Economic. International sanctions and trade restrictions may shift depending on how the new leadership engages with foreign nations and the global financial system. Nuclear and missile programs. The continuity or disruption of Iran's nuclear ambitions will be closely monitored, particularly in light of prior operations like Midnight Hammer and Epic Fury. Historical context. This event cannot be divorced from the broader historical tensions between Israel, the United States, and Iran. Since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, Iran's government has maintained a complex network of alliances and rivalries that extend across the Middle East. Israel has consistently identified Iran's leadership as a strategic threat, particularly regarding nuclear development, missile programs, and support for proxy groups. U.S.-Iran relations have similarly been fraught, with prior agreements such as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action (JCPOA) offering temporary frameworks that have since eroded due to political disagreements and sanctions. Today's strikes represent the latest and most direct chapter in a decades-long contest for regional influence. News of Ayatollah Khamenei's death has sent shockwaves across the Middle East. Regional powers, particularly Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and the Gulf states, are closely monitoring the situation for signs of instability or potential escalation. In Riyadh, officials convened emergency meetings to assess how Iran's leadership vacuum could affect oil markets, border security, and ongoing conflicts in Yemen and Syria. Iraq, which has historically served as both a conduit and buffer for Iranian influence, is preparing contingency plans to prevent domestic unrest from spilling over. Baghdad's complex sectarian landscape means that any perceived weakness in Tehran could embolden Iranian-aligned militias or political factions to assert greater influence within Iraq's borders. Syria, where Iran has long maintained a military foothold, also faces uncertainty. Iranian advisors and commanders embedded within Syrian forces may face rapid changes in orders or priorities as the country processes the loss of its central leadership. Analysts warn that this could result in shifts in the Syrian battlefield, potentially affecting the ongoing civil conflict and regional power dynamics. Non-state actors. Proxy dynamics. Iran's network of regional proxies, including Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shiite militias in Iraq, the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and other allied factions, face a critical strategic juncture. These groups rely on Iran for funding, training, and political direction. Khamenei's death introduces both uncertainty and opportunity. Some factions may seize the moment to increase regional assertiveness, while others may retreat temporarily to recalibrate their strategies. Hezbollah, in particular, may face internal debates about how aggressively to respond to what it could perceive as an act of war against its patron. Analysts caution that any retaliation against Israel, or even broader strikes against Western interests, could trigger a wider conflict, raising the stakes for the entire region. U.S. strategic calculations. From the U.S. perspective, the strikes represent a delicate balance between deterring Iran and avoiding a broader regional war. Sources suggest that President Trump and senior advisors considered multiple scenarios, including both short-term, limited strikes and more extensive campaigns targeting Iran's military and nuclear infrastructure. During discussions at Mar-a-Lago, President Trump reportedly emphasized multiple off-ramps, options that could allow the U.S. to achieve strategic objectives while minimizing long-term entanglement. According to sources, these off-ramps could include a rapid military campaign targeting key Iranian sites to enforce compliance with U.S. demands, a period of diplomatic pressure paired with the threat of renewed strikes to ensure Iran refrains from rebuilding its nuclear or missile programs, contingency plans for escalation in case of Iranian retaliation, including missile defense deployments and prepositioning of forces in the Gulf region. Analysts suggest that these considerations highlight the complexity of a military operation aimed at decapitating Iran's leadership. Even with Khamenei eliminated, the broader network of commanders, clerics, and political figures ensures that Iran retains considerable capacity to resist pressure. Iran's domestic political landscape. Internally, Iran is facing a moment of profound uncertainty. The supreme leader's death removes the central figure of authority, potentially creating opportunities for both hardline and reformist factions to assert influence. While the regime has prepared for succession contingencies, the process is inherently opaque and fraught with factional tensions. Observers are particularly attentive to the Assembly of Experts, the clerical body responsible for selecting the next supreme leader. Historically, this group has operated behind closed doors, balancing competing interests and weighing religious, political, and military credentials. Analysts predict that negotiations may be protracted and contentious, with potential for temporary instability or even intra-clerical conflict. Economic implications. The death of Khamenei also has immediate and potential long-term economic consequences. Markets reacted sharply to the news, with oil prices spiking amid fears of regional instability and potential disruptions in production or shipping lanes. Iran's currency, the rial, has reportedly faced downward pressure in domestic trading, reflecting uncertainty about the country's immediate economic future. Sanctions enforcement could also shift in the coming weeks. U.S. officials may leverage the leadership vacuum to press for compliance with international agreements or demand greater transparency on nuclear programs. Meanwhile, neighboring states are closely evaluating trade and investment risks in the event of further instability. Nuclear and missile programs, strategic concerns. A central question for global security is the future of Iran's nuclear and missile programs. Operations like Midnight Hammer and Epic Fury were designed to slow or halt Iran's development of nuclear weapons and long-range missile capabilities. With Khamenei's death, the direction and priority of these programs could shift, depending on the stance of the next supreme leader. Intelligence sources indicate that while the infrastructure remains intact, leadership transitions may introduce temporary disruptions. Analysts stress that this period is critical. Without clear direction, Iran's nuclear ambitions may slow, but the risk of clandestine continuation remains high. The international community will be watching closely, seeking both reassurance and verification of Iran's intentions. Historical context. Long-standing tensions. This event cannot be understood in isolation. Tensions between Israel, the United States, and Iran have spanned decades, marked by periods of open confrontation, proxy conflicts, and diplomatic negotiations. Since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, Iran has developed a network of alliances and influence extending from Lebanon to Yemen, supporting proxy groups and opposing Western-aligned governments. Israel has repeatedly identified Iran's leadership as a direct threat to regional security, particularly concerning nuclear development and missile proliferation. U.S.-Iran relations have similarly oscillated between negotiation and confrontation, with the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action offering a temporary framework for engagement. Today's strikes represent a dramatic escalation, demonstrating both the risks and the consequences of prolonged tensions. Potential scenarios moving forward. Looking ahead, multiple scenarios could unfold following the elimination of Iran's supreme leader. Rapid succession and stabilization. Iran may quickly appoint a new supreme leader, consolidating power and minimizing internal disruption. This could preserve the regime's stability but maintain existing foreign policy stances. Factional struggles. Competing factions may contest succession, leading to political infighting and temporary instability. This could embolden dissidents or external actors to influence Iran's trajectory. Retaliatory escalation. Iran or aligned groups may engage in military retaliation against Israel, U.S. forces, or regional allies. While containment is possible, the risk of broader conflict remains significant. Gradual policy shift. A new supreme leader may adopt a more pragmatic or conciliatory approach, potentially opening avenues for renewed diplomacy or redefined regional strategies.